Your biggest weakness when it comes to your podcast might actually be your intelligence. All of the things that you've learned in your precious life probably served you well in the context of your interviews and the mic riffing that you do when you're hosting. But when it comes to that clever name you gave your podcast, it's probably not winning you as many audience members as you thought it would. This is a mindset I have fought against for years. Like, why should I have to dumb it down? The right people will get it. But what it boils down to is when you're trying to get the attention of your ideal audience, especially as our attention becomes ever more fractured, you have to make it absolutely effortless for them to find you and to know who you are and what you have to offer. They'll never have the chance to experience your wit and wisdom if the sign above your door doesn't offer a clear reason for them to come inside and to shop around and see what you have to offer. Hi, I'm Courtney Reimer, and this is Talking the Talk, a podcast about podcasting where lessons learned become your wisdom earned. Today's episode is about your podcast's identity and its brand and its positioning and the sometimes painful difference between what we love and what actually makes people tap in and listen. My guest is Jason Cercone, a podcast strategist that I met at the Empowered Podcasting Conference, and we immediately hit it off because we think quite a bit alike. He recently rebranded his own show. It certainly wasn't an easy decision, but because he started paying attention and looking at the signals he was receiving about how his audience was responding to it and was his audience in alignment with his goals and the business he wanted to build, he realized it was time to make a change. So in this episode, Jason and I talk about why clarity beats clever in these crowded podcast apps, the importance of clear branding, especially for niche podcasts like this one, and how pivoting isn't something to be afraid of. Here's my conversation with Jason Cercone. So welcome, Jason. The reason I have you on my show is not just because we're sort of strategy twins, and I know you'll parrot a lot of the same beliefs and theories I have around podcast strategy, but I'm wondering if you ever find yourself breaking your own rules when you're making a podcast.
Oh, hell yeah. It's part of the game. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about podcasting is it's this blank canvas on which we can create and see what works, see what we like, see what we don't. And then if we need to pivot, then we pivot. We're not tied down to any hard and fast rules. Now, there are some things that I believe that all podcasters should adhere to because it's going to make for a better listener experience. But from our own creativity, I think we have a lot of leeway on how we can create and ultimately come up with something that not only are our audience members happy to listen to, but we're proud to produce and stand behind.
You use the word blank canvas. I say that all the time in my cohorts and people who are new to podcasting, that they think there's a certain way. It's got to be an interview show and it's got to talk to these kind of people in this way. It's the most beautiful broad canvas in the world. And I get tingles just thinking about it.
And I think we both would agree that it's different for every single person. And which is why you can't get tethered to, I'm doing interview shows because this is what every show I listen to is about, or that's how they're formatted, or this is what this expert told me to do. No, you have to define what works for you. And I believe both of us as strategists understand that it's not going to be the same outcome for the person over here that starts a podcast today versus the person over here. And we have to determine how we're going to make that work for everybody on an individual basis.
I find myself doing this right now. For example, the name of my podcast, who knows if it's the right one? I've told my people that I advise, it's not a permanent decision, right? It's your feed. You're going to own it. And if you scroll back through most people's feeds, they used to be called something different. Their art used to be different. So reminding ourselves that we own this, which is the beauty of it, and we can decide what to do. We have an obligation to an audience, if we have an audience, to hold the promise that we've made. Or as we are changing that promise, we communicate that to them.
The magic word.
Yeah, I would love to hear because I know you're going through an evolution. I would love to hear how I feel you came to it very deliberately. It wasn't a rash decision.
Yeah, as we speak, I'm putting the final touches on what will roll out in a couple days with a new show name. And I was evaluating a lot of different things. One of the big things about my story with this show was when I started my company, I worked with a branding expert. I didn't work with her officially. She was a guest on one of my past podcasts. We really hit it off. She sent me her book. Her book is about, and I should give her credit, her name's Alexandra Watkins. She's phenomenal. Her company's called Eat My Words. She's the person behind naming the Baconator at Wendy's. So
Wow.
she knows her stuff. And she sent me her book. When she sent it, I wasn't really in that rebrand mode yet, but once I got there a couple months later, picked up her book, couldn't put it down. Finished reading it over a weekend. And then I went back to the book and used it as a guide as I laid out all of the steps that she said you should put in place to come up with a good brand name. And I had landed on a couple that I thought would be good. And then it was, the more I said it, I just wasn't excited. And then one that I really got excited about was already taken. And then one day I was at the gym and I had my playlist going and a Rage Against the Machine song came on, one of my favorite bands. And it made me think, Bomb Track, that's a cool name. It wasn't the name of the song, but that's one of their songs. It wasn't the one I was listening to, but that was what inspired it. So I started thinking, and so I'm on the treadmill and I'm playing this through like Bomb Track Media. That sounds good. I really like the sound of that. It's got that explosive feel. And all of a sudden I'm like pulling all of these lessons and ideas that she said you should be thinking about. My first thought was, this name will be taken. I guarantee I get off this treadmill and I look it up and somebody's already going to have this. To my surprise, it was not taken. So I said, okay, I think I've got something here. I'm going to run with this. 10 seconds later, I kid you not, I said, oh my God, my podcast can be called Let's Blow This Up. Because it goes in, it's all in the theme and it's all fitting, it's explosive, yada, yada, yada. When I took this to her, she was my litmus test. I went to some friends and said, what do you think? They said, yeah, that sounds good. But I wanted her approval. She loved it, loved everything about it. There's an episode on my show with her praising it, and she talks about how she now uses my brand as an example when she's teaching others about how to come up with a good, sticky brand name. So did the name Let's Blow This Up fit my brand? Yes. Does it tell the story of what I do? Absolutely not. Doing podcast strategy, helping people in that world, I can't gain visibility with a podcast called Let's Blow This Up. It doesn't fit. No one's searching for that in hopes of finding podcast content and podcast guidance. And the more I was pushing through, I started playing with taglines and I started trying to do these different things. And I was like, this is not clicking. I'm missing something here. So I had it on the front of my mind to make this very big decision because I do love the name Let's Blow This Up. Don't get me wrong. I've been strong advocate for my brands or my podcast name and how it fits my brand. However, with where I want my business to go, I was thinking a change we might be in need of this sooner rather than later. So I said to myself, go to Podfest. You're going there anyway. Go to some of the breakout sessions that are talking about this subject. See what they say. See if they give any type of guidance or thoughts or anything that would make you say this is the right decision. The very first one I attended said, it was all about being visible in the podcast apps when people search for terms in your demographic, in your world. Pair that with a coach that I've been following very closely through his newsletter and through social media. And I was like, that there it is.
Wow.
This has to happen. And so I made that day, I started making notes and plans about what can I do to roll this out when I get home. And here we are.
Are you going to tell me the name yet?
Oh, yeah. It's called Podcasting Strategy Simplified.
Well, there you go. It's to the point.
Right. Like on the nose, it gives a person, you look at that name and say, okay, this is what I'm getting when I listen to this show. And that's how the content will be built. And I'm not going to call it a mistake. I'm not going to say what I did to start was a mistake. But I think I probably cost myself a lot of traction that I could have gained had I started off with that name. And it's almost like counterintuitive to what we talk about with strategy. These are things that I was so sold on that name that I don't think I ever even considered anything else. But I probably should have. But that's okay. I feel that, again, going back to what we said when we kicked off here, we're in a space where we can make pivots and we make some changes. And I don't have millions of listeners. In fact, I never will, because I have a very niche topic that I don't need to have the world to show up and listen to. I just need the right people to understand how I can help them. And then hopefully they see enough in what I do that I could officially help them as a coach or a consultant or strategist. So big decision, but I feel it's going to be one for the better. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how everything unfolds once I get all the new pieces in place.
Me too. And it's two things came to mind. One, I went to journalism school, and one of the things they hammer home a lot about headlines and leads are Clever is nice, but
Mhm.
clear is essential. When someone's scrolling through the app or social media or whatever it is, looking for their next listen or watch, whatever format you're in, they don't have time for clever to put it together. For example, my last name is pronounced Reimer. Most people look at it and think Reamer. And I was thinking of putting in LinkedIn like a Beastie Boy, because all of their raps rhyme. And this woman, I adore her. We had just met. She had just given a keynote. Shout out to conferences. We met at a conference. We love conferences. More on that in
Yes,
a
yes,
sec.
yes.
The way she introduced herself, Christina Flynn, will name you too. Christina with a K. And I was like, oh, that imprints it in your memory, right? And you don't have to think about it. And I swear this ties to branding because you just have to know like that. And so I was like a Beastie Boy. And isn't that so clever? Because, the Beastie Boys always rhyme their lyrics. And my name is Rhymer. Yeah, this is great. Meanwhile, they're thinking, what, she's a rap star? So Christina is like, nah, that's too much. People are not going to sit with their
Well,
thumb scrolling and think. So my whole point as a counterpoint was, so you mentioned taglines. Taglines aren't the first thing you see.
No.
Sure, once you're in the door, once the person has decided to listen, then you can have a tagline that further clarifies the promise of the title.
Yeah.
But you first have to get them in the door. And so my story is I decided to make a podcast after resisting it and after making them for other people for decades based on, again, a conference. I was at Amy Nelson's The Gathering, which is, for lack of a better term, content-forward entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs. My mentor, Maggie Murphy, will also get a shout out. Was my boss at Audible for a bit. She came and watched me give my talk, and I have this line where I'm like, I'm a shoeless cobbler. I've made podcasts for Meghan Markle and did it for years at Audible. I don't have one of my own. You should trust me anyway. And she was like, great talk, but you can't say that shoeless cobbler thing anymore. And it can't be true. That cannot be the case. You need your podcast. I was like, who has time? And I can't do that. And I'm too busy. And I was like, wait a second. To your point about simplified, right? Like you and I probably have these frameworks that we share with people that say, yes, podcasting can fit into your life. Here's how.
Yeah.
But I couldn't figure it out for myself. I was like, what's time? It's called talking the talk because basically what my mentor's message to me was, you can't keep just talking the talk. You have to walk the walk.
Yeah.
It requires a little bit. We'll see. I'm hoping the talk part. This is also on a thing I want to ask you about. One thing I say to my clients, people I advise on strategy, when they're making their art, their cover art, I'm like, please don't put a microphone on it. Everyone puts a microphone on their podcast art.
Yes.
Right?
Microphone and the sound wave. They
I
don't make you
know.
stand out anymore. They make you blend in.
I
Put those
know.
on your.
You're in the podcast app. You already know what it is you're about to receive.
Yes.
But I won't lie, there was that instinct for me to emphasize this is a podcast by putting headphones or
Nope.
the words do more work.
And I'll one-up you on that.
Yeah.
The word podcast, I don't think that's necessary anymore. I've been arguing that for a long time, and some people are just adamant that you have to have that to distinguish it. And it's like people are finding this information in a podcast app, so I don't care how dumb they are. They're going to know that they're finding a podcast, and if they find it anywhere else, does it matter? You just want them to find it. If they land in a podcast app or they find it on your website, and your podcast should absolutely be tied to your website, they found you. That's what matters. So, like, I mean, the one that really just jumps out at me was called the Podcast About Something Podcast. That's over here from the Department of Redundancy Department.
Yeah.
Why do we need it twice?
Exactly. And the thing is, we have such limited space. And this is another thing I do with clients is they'll have a designer or they'll make their own. And it's this huge resolution on their screen. And I have them always put it in situ with a mosaic of others to see, A, what it'll look like at a small resolution, and B, in context of others. And I think that's so important. If you're going to waste, you have 200 pixels to work with or whatever, you're going to waste 100 of those with the word podcast.
Yeah.
Missed opportunity to
100%.
say something.
Yeah. There's so many things to consider, which is why I lead with strategy. And I think that there are a lot of items that come up for a brand new podcast. And Courtney, you're an exception because you've been helping in this arena for years. But someone that has never gone down this road, I've been asked the question, what would you do differently? One of those general, if you could go back in time type of things. And the first thing I say is I would find a strategist or a consultant or somebody I could throw money at and tell me how to do this better right off the start versus let me just see what I can figure out on my own. Now, granted, there's resources out there that can help you, but if someone could sit with you and literally break down all of the items they effed up in the past so you don't have to. They walked so you can run. That's amazing. And it's a huge time saver. So I'm not shilling for me to be that person for anybody, but I think that's something to consider when you're launching a podcast. You don't know what you don't know.
Sure.
And
And you
there's no
don't,
shame in that, but it's better to get some knowledge on some of those basic things that might trip you up because they're easily avoidable if you know that the landmine is there. And then you
yeah.
can focus on the big things that are ultimately going to help you grow.
What are the analogies? You wouldn't just ask ChatGPT how to be a surgeon and then go perform brain surgery. We're not doing that. In every other profession or skill, you have someone help teach you how to do it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm with you. What do people come to you with most? What's the door that opens where they're like, Jason, I want to make a podcast, but I don't know X? What's the thing?
The biggest thing that I've encountered, I believe that it's, to me, I've always, at least recently, the most logical comparison I've made is years ago, people would say, you should write a book. And everyone, oh, yeah, you're right. I know so much about this. I should write a book. Now people say, you should start a podcast. And that is way more accessible and a lot less of a lift. But when they don't know what they don't know, I think most people come into this saying, I'll start a podcast. And then the world will fall at my feet. And my bank account will fill up and overflow with riches, and I'll be doing the backstroke and all my money like Scrooge McDuck. And it could not be anywhere further from that potential scenario, especially if you have not built any kind of audience yet. And even if you have to understand that audience, maybe they pay attention to you on a certain medium, but that does not mean that they'll become a podcast listener. They may not listen to podcasts. Some will. But the whole audience will not just instantly jump over. And I think that throws a lot of people off because they'll come into it saying, I've got 15,000 subscribers on my email list and 50% of them open my emails and I get clicked through and my social media is on fire. But then they start a podcast. It's a whole new medium and it's crickets at first. And crickets is different for everybody. Believe me, some people could get a few hundred listeners on a podcast and be like, why doesn't anybody listen to my show? But then
and for some people, that would be very lucky.
Oh my God, I'm killing it over here. Look at how great I am. But that's why I always lead off when people come to me about podcasts. The first question I ask is why?
Yeah.
I want to know if they've even thought on that level of why they want to do a podcast. And some people haven't. I know the first 30 minutes of my VIP strategy days is spent on mindset and really zeroing in on that why. And I've had one client who came to the table with it so well defined. I said, we got 28 minutes here. Do you want to just get breakfast and we'll come back? Or do you want to just keep going? She nailed it. Absolutely understood what she wanted to accomplish, knew that she wasn't going to ever be as big as Joe Rogan, had no thoughts of ever being that big, but knew she had a topic that people in her industry would care about. And she wanted to talk about it.
Yeah.
And she knew that she had expertise that she had built over a career that could be useful to others. And I want to put that out there for people to consume. Doesn't get any better and more clear than that. And of course, you can zero in and ask a couple follow-ups. But overall, the biggest thing that I encounter is I don't know where it came from. I think there's just a lot of guru bullshit out there that feeds this narrative that this is easy.
Yeah.
And getting a podcast to grow is easy. Okay, I want to do that. Starting is easy. The barriers to entry, relatively low. Growing and maintaining and staying engaged and looking at numbers that may not be what you had in mind. And honestly, I don't know even how you would have numbers in mind because, again, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
That's where it really comes into play. That's where that mindset is. You got to have a long-term mission in mind. You got to know where you're going. And I like to address that as soon as possible. That way it makes the rest of the journey much, much easier.
Yeah. And listen, I'm with you. Whenever a potential client comes to me saying, I want to launch a podcast, I ask the why. And I also have an intake form and it's, what are your goals? And anyone who says direct revenue, I'm going to monetize this and I'm going to retire on it, Scrooge McDuck, whichever metaphor you want. I honestly will sometimes be like, I can't help you unless you already have a YouTube channel and you want to convert it into something else. And those two are converging and we can talk about that as well.
Yeah, sure.
But that whole, even if you have a following and it's not always going to convert because it's apples to oranges. But I will sometimes say, that's not what I can help you with. I can't help you become the next Joe Rogan. And that guy already gets enough airtime. You know what I mean? I can't suddenly make you this chart topping phenomenon across the board. Maybe for your exact people, and you spoke to this a little bit before, which is there's probably a ceiling to how many people will want podcasting strategy simplified. I was telling one of my clients, Bill, I'm going to start a podcast. Oh, what's it about? And you think we've been working together for months. I was like, it's going to basically be for the people that I serve, which is people who want to figure out what makes a podcast work, how to make one, and how to keep it going. And basically that. And he was like, isn't that really niche? I'm like, Bill, have you not been listening? Yes, niche is, that's the whole point. But let's talk about monetization. I think some of our clientele might be slightly different. I could be wrong, but I used to be like, no, if you want to make direct green dollars from your podcast, I don't want to have you have any illusions that's working with me is going to bring you that.
Yeah.
But with the advent of subscriptions and this mindset shift of, I want to support creators in the same way I would pay a subscription fee to Netflix or the New York Times.
Yeah.
What do you think? Is that something that's meaningful to a first-time podcaster?
I think the most important thing to understand is you were dancing around it for sure. It's different for everybody. Monetization could mean something as simple as, I'll use my show as an example as I'm doing this rebrand. I set up a buy me a coffee account. And I'm going to put a link in there basically. And I'm not going to talk about it every episode. It's just going to be there in the show notes. If you found today's episode useful or it was a tip that helped you do something, you want to kick me $5 to say thank you, here it is. I'm not going to drive myself like, hey, you got to support me, give me money. No, it's there. Leave a tip if you'd like to. That's monetization.
Yep.
It may not be much. It's not going to change the game, but shows, in my mind, it's a gauge of this person actually was able to take the advice I was giving and apply it. Now I can take that information. Let's say I put out an episode that was so great, I got $50 in tips. Just use that as a round number. Oh my God, this meant something to a handful of people. I'm going to capitalize on that by using more episodes to talk about this subject.
It's also a metric. It's not just...
Yeah, because you don't get a lot of that type of metric from the stats that podcast platforms give you.
Yeah.
But when it comes to monetization, to simplify this whole thing, since that's my thing here, what do you want that monetization to be? And that's how you have to build your show. If you want to do ads and revenue, ads and sponsors and generate revenue that way, that's a longer road. And you have to understand how that system works. Sponsors can be gained on a number of different levels based on how you pitch to a potential sponsor. And you could go to them with no episodes done and say, this is what I'm building. It's in the arena that you also play in. These are people you talk to. Would you like to grow with me? I would like you to be my sponsor. I would like to start small. And as my audience grows, we can talk about the next level of your investment. But to start off, I would only charge you X, and you would be part of my newsletter, my social media strategy. You would really be all in on what I'm doing. To get ads inserted that are going to actually pay you, you've got to have thousands of listeners because it's based on the old radio model or the CPM, the cost per mil or cost per milli, however you want to say it. So every 1,000 downloads, depending on the agreement you've worked out with that company, you'll get paid XYZ. So let's say every 1,000 downloads, you're getting $20. Okay, well, how many downloads do you have? If you've only got a handful, even if you don't have 1,000, then what's the point of pursuing that angle? I know my instruction on this is a little differently because I mostly work with companies that have a product or service or course or something, coaching, consulting, something they can sell. That's the monetization to me. You're going to make more money selling your product, your service, than you ever would trying to generate money through advertising. Then as you grow, you could potentially say, my show has helped me bring X amount of clients in. That might be something that a potential sponsor sees value in. But from the start, you have to be realistic about it. You can't just think because you're pressing record and you're starting a show where you talk about your industry plus you drink bourbon while you do it, that you're breaking any ground. You got to be and it's tongue-in-cheek to say that, but the strategy is where you lay out, okay, here are some of the small wins that I can make. Maybe they're not directly tied to money, but I'm going to at least gain some traction in this silo while I grow my audience and get closer to that point where monetization is more realistic.
Yeah.
If you address that on the front end, you won't be discouraged when you're 15 episodes deep and scratching your head going, why don't I have listeners? I can't get any sponsors with this. This isn't working. And then you quit. Nothing's ever going to happen if you quit.
Yeah, that's right.
So nail these details down early, and that's going to help you monetize in the long run, which really should be the name of the game for you.
I feel like we're getting a free masterclass right here. It was
Here
just
we are.
like, that was perfect.
I'll send you the invoice when we're done.
There's so much to unpack there, but I will say that you kind of blew my mind with the buy me a coffee thing, which I recommend that kind of thing to clients because, especially if you're paying an editor or someone else to produce it, and if you only see money going out of your account and it's just almost a psychological, oh, I got $25 worth of coffee out of that episode. It feels like, okay, I'm not just bleeding. There is some sort of like, yeah. I have been saying, I wonder if you actually have, and it's okay if not, because I think together we could build a case study with this where there's the podcast industry and the hucksters. We could also talk about that, the snake oil salespeople, but there are legitimate people whose whole business, people and businesses, is to sell sponsorships and to find sponsorships. But for the people who are starting from absolute zero, I have recommended the same thing. Like, hey, do you know a fellow small business owner who is also looking for visibility? Yeah. Even just like a proof of concept of what an ad would sound like. Let's partner up on this. And I think it sends two signals. One, I'm open for business for these kinds of ads. It almost exudes legitimacy to have an ad on your podcast, even better if it's host read. Yeah. And it works that muscle like if it is a host read ad. You got to try it first and show that you're capable of it. Yeah. But have you heard of people who kind of DIY and roll their own sponsorship in that way?
I usually recommend it to my clients. You're in a way that you want to position yourself. If you're the expert, there's no reason why you can't run an ad for your service, for your product. You want people to know that it exists. It's one of those things. If people don't know you have a horse for sale, they can't buy your horse.
Even if you're a cowboy or a horseback rider, they might not put those two things together.
No, and that's a lot of times I've heard this. I cannot remember what show I've heard this on. I know I've heard it in a number of different iterations, but one person said they had a person on their email list for years, and they mentioned something that they had in place the whole time their business was operational, but they never talked about it. The one time they finally mentioned in this email, this person finally bought. And when they connected to talk, the person said, I didn't know you did that. It seems like we talk about what we do all the time, but there is, for one, we're not talking about it as much as we think. And there's also so much other information that people are being bombarded with on a daily, hourly, minute basis that sometimes it just slips our mind.
It goes back to that branding. It's a form of branding, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't make a person stupid that they can't say, oh, Jason, I guess, identifies as a podcast strategist and has a podcast. Therefore, he has a package that I could buy. Right. You have to tell them because, like you said, like their brains are all over. You have to say to them, do you like what I have to say? Would you like me to customize this advice for you? Here's how you get it. And it's just helping. It's helpful to be clear.
100%.
So, are you a proponent? You advise people to learn Descript or what have you, or find someone who already knows how?
That's one of those ones that's real hard because, I mean, we want to talk about walking the walk and talking the talk. I've always liked editing my own shows personally. However, I know most people I talk to do not give a crap to learn that skill. That's the one. And honestly, I think it's one of the biggest hurdles. Most people won't start because of the post-production work. They don't want to learn that. And it is a whole new skill set in and of itself. So I think especially for a busy brand leader, business owner, someone that's looking to implement podcasting for visibility, for marketing, to amplify their brand, editing is probably not anything they're going to care about. So the biggest part of this answer, I'm going to say outsource.
It's so funny. I have the same problem as you, no surprise, where I say I'm not going to edit it, but then I can't. I start and I can't stop. I love to edit, but it's also not the best use of my time. Exactly. So I have to stop. Yep. Back to my questions. Scripted or loose outline or something else?
I go 100% unscripted, but I'm also 11 years deep in the game. I don't believe in scripting anything 100% because it comes off very much like you're reading a book, you're reading a script, you're just not flowing. You're not natural. The bullet points are fine. I think just having a couple ideas of what you want to talk about is good. And I will say this has never failed me. More than you know. And talk about what you know more than you believe. And I've challenged many of my clients when we went to that first episode, once we had their strategy laid out and we had everything ready to go. They knew what they wanted to talk about. I'll probably be lucky to get half an hour out of this. All right. And I just let them go.
Yeah.
Time it. We don't put any kind of barrier on it. I just want them to get comfortable. And across the board, everyone has gone so far beyond what they thought they'd get to. And I tell them that I let you go for a reason. For one, you needed to prove it to yourself that you have a lot to cover on this subject matter. And B, I didn't want to come in after half an hour and be like, time's up. That's terrible. And that's going to throw a person off their game as well. They're just now to a point where they feel like they can be in front of a camera on a microphone. Let's let that play out. But all of us don't give ourselves enough credit. We know more about what we have, or what we think we know, and we can talk about it in much more detail than we ever give ourselves credit for. So don't sit down and script everything out word for word. Just roll with it, baby.
I agree. You're half life coach and podcast strategist, because there is a certain amount of building someone up a little bit and giving them confidence in themselves.
That's a big part of it. Actually, one of my old past clients, she stopped her podcast a couple of years ago. She's a therapist, and she said I was her podcast therapist.
Yeah.
Because I was helping her a lot in that realm.
Maybe that could be your spinoff.
I tried it. It didn't test well. I tried
okay. It didn't test.
It didn't test well.
Okay. I'm going to frame this for a new podcaster.
Okay.
Do you recommend seasonal or always on or TBD?
That's a great question, because I think a lot of people get into the guru bullshit of got to be there every week, got to do it this way, got to do it like everybody else has. And the reality of it is you've never done this before. When you first rode a bike, did you drive down the steepest mountain in your town? No, you rode around a parking lot with training wheels and someone holding on to the back. You got to get used to this. Can you learn doing it with a weekly podcast? Absolutely. And of course, more frequency obviously gives you more chance to put in the reps. But if you really want to test what this network or what this platform can do for you, there's no shame in saying, you know what, I'm going to do a season of 7 or 8 episodes. We're going to put that out. We're going to see how it goes. I'm going to see what kind of response I get. I'm going to get comfortable with how this process works. And then I can determine from there whether it makes sense for me to continue building it in seasons, or, you know what, I love this and the response has been great. We're just going to go weekly from here on out. No one's telling you can't do that. But I think a lot of people get tripped up on, I started this way, I got to stay here. Or there's no way I can pull it back. People are going to think I don't have my crap together.
Yeah.
Here I am. I did 3 seasons. I'm now switching to a weekly format. I never, ever, ever thought I would do that again. I'm also launching another podcast. That one will be done in seasons, and I'm not ready to talk about that one yet.
Ooh, so you are one of these podcast guys.
Yeah, I'm one of those crazy people that you hear about and you read about on
For sure. For sure.
But overall, I think it really comes down to time. And that's one of the biggest things most people don't factor in when they're getting started. How much time do I really have to do this? If you've got all the time in the world, it behooves you to do something where you can go weekly or maybe even more than once a week. But again, I'm working with business owners and professionals in a number of different fields. Time is not exactly something they have an abundance of.
Right.
So what can we do to help you leverage that platform in a way that allows you to capitalize on everything it can give you, but not suck up time you don't have?
And also, like, it has to, good answer. I always say your biggest competition, both in terms of audience and stamina and sustainability, is time.
Yeah.
But also, I can't help but be a little bit cheesy and life coachy myself. Joy. Let's say you commit to a season and it is not bringing you any joy. It's okay. People aren't thinking about you as much as you think they are.
Absolutely true.
So Courtney goes and she does 8 episodes of a season and then wait, never mind. I prefer being on the other side of that's okay. You tried it. It didn't bring you joy. Life's too short.
That's right.
All right. More questions for you. I'm going to skip ahead to the fill in the blanks. AI in podcasting is
a tool if you're using it right, but it should never be something that's hosting your show ever.
Yeah.
That's just slop on another level.
I would say AI is complicated, right? Because there's like a love-hate with it.
Yeah, the tools that are in place can help production and help trim some time off what you have to invest into making your show. But I mean, I've seen people that are using an AI host. Podcasting is all about organic conversation. That's always been my take on it. If you're going to start removing the human element from podcasting, then it's no longer a podcast. Stop it.
Okay, here's another big one. Podcasting right now feels...
Oh boy, that's a good one. I feel like it's at one of those weird junctures of it's defined itself, but there's still room to add to the definition because we're 20 some years into what podcasting started off as, but it's nowhere near what it was 20 some years ago. Audio feeds are, yes, available through RSS, but they're so much more accessible now than they ever were back in the day. But video is now adding so many new layers to the equation that I feel that you can't get married to one or the other. And there's a lot of people that have been in podcasting since the early days that were just like video. No video. But I look at it almost like radio and television. When the new technology was available to us, people didn't just abandon the other. They found a way to implement both into their lives. So this video feature is big. The audio feature, to me, in my opinion, will never go away because audio can be consumed in a passive nature. You can do it on the train, in the car, while you're walking, while you're at the gym, you name it. And if you don't want to do that when you're out and about, you have the video option. So you can do that as well. So a lot of benefits to that.
Podcasting at its best is...
untouchable. And I say
Nice.
that for a number of reasons because not only do you have this great audio tool or audio thing that you created for someone to consume, if you do it right, you've got something that you can repurpose time and time again for a number of different reasons, a number of different needs. So you could check off a lot of boxes if you do this right. And that I'll go back to the strategy part. Developing that in the beginning will help in the long run, but it's untouchable if you do this right.
I agree. Jason, my strategy twin, I am so thankful you could be on my show, and I cannot wait to see your new brand for your show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Courtney. It was a lot of fun.
What I can't stop thinking about since my conversation with Jason Cercone, apart from the fact that I have the words podcast and podcasting in my cover art, is how being clever and having a way with words makes you an excellent podcast host and interviewer. But it can be to your detriment if it shows up a little too much in your titles. It also makes you a missed opportunity for your ideal audience if they just scroll right past. As someone who for years took pride in not following the pack, it's a lesson I have to keep learning over and over again, which is conventions are there for a reason. Formulas work. Doesn't mean you have to be formulaic, but there's a reason why there are certain best practices for everything, including podcast titles. And while pivots can be very, very scary, Jason is a perfect example of how to make a very intentional, informed decision to evolve so that your show grows as you do. And as the industry continues to grow exponentially, as the audience continues to grow. Apart from being jealous of how Jason totally nailed it with his podcast title, let's see what we can take away from his brand evolution, all right? Whether you're just noodling on a podcast idea or haven't even landed on a title yet, or you've been doing this for some time, ask yourself, if your ideal audience scrolled upon your show today and saw only the title, would it stop their thumb in its tracks? Would they immediately know what they're getting? Or would it be, to borrow a term from comedy, a thinker? Because it takes a minute to land with the audience? If so, you might want to rethink it. At the rate people's thumbs are trained to scroll nowadays, you don't have a minute for it to land. You're lucky if you even get a fraction of a second. Let me know what you took away from my conversation with Jason Cercone, whose podcast, in case you missed it, is now called Podcasting Strategy Simplified. Drop me an email at Courtney@soundsgreatstrategy.com. That's really my email, Courtney@soundsgreatstrategy.com. I'd love to hear from you. This is Courtney Reimer. Thanks for listening to me and Jason Cercone talking the talk. Glad you found us.